How could justice fail so spectacularly? The shocking sentence for Menglong's killers has ignited protests across the globe, leaving millions questioning the very meaning of justice itself. What lies behind this explosive verdict? Why has it enraged the world? Let's join Red Carpet Reveal to uncover the truth now. The courtroom was silent. Yet the silence carried a tension so sharp it could cut through steel. Cameras clicked. Pens hovered above notepads. And millions around the world leaned closer to their screens, awaiting the words that would define justice, or betray it. Then the gavel struck. And the sentence for Menglong's killers was delivered. What should have been a moment of closure became a moment of outrage. The punishment, light compared to the brutality of the crime. Shockwaves across the nation and far beyond. Tears fell, shouts erupted. And before the echoes of the gavel had faded, a firestorm of anger had ignited. For those who had followed the tragedy of Menglong's death, the verdict was not merely a legal decision. It was a question of morality. A measure of whether the system valued truth over power, justice over corruption. Menglong had not been an ordinary figure, he was a star whose artistry had touched millions. A young man whose rise to fame symbolized the dreams of a generation. His brutal end had already scarred the public psyche, but now, the very institution meant to deliver justice seemed to have betrayed him. Inside the courtroom, his family's cries filled the air. His mother clutched his photo to her chest, sobbing as she demanded answers. His father stood rigid, his face pale but his voice trembling with fury as he condemned the sentence as a mockery of justice. "My son was taken from us in the most cruel way," he declared. "And now the law tells us his life is worth so little? This is not justice. This is betrayal." His words pierced through the cameras and microphones. Millions who felt the same fury burn within their own hearts. The trial had been closely followed from the very beginning. Prosecution painted a harrowing picture of Menglong's final moments, presenting evidence of premeditation, brutality, and utter disregard for human life. They called for a sentence that would reflect the gravity of the crime. But the defense pushed back with arguments of youth, influence, and supposed remorse. They highlighted technicalities, exploited loopholes, and presented their clients as misunderstood rather than malicious. And when the judge finally sided closer to leniency than severity, the outrage was immediate. The sentence was not merely about numbers or years behind bars. It was about what those numbers represented, the value of a human life, the accountability of those who take it, and the integrity of a system meant to protect the innocent. To Menglong's fans, to ordinary citizens, global observers, the verdict symbolized the erosion of justice itself. The media wasted no time in amplifying the uproar. Headlines screamed across front pages, "Justice denied. A nation betrayed. Verdict sparks outrage." Television anchors spoke with visible disbelief as they recounted the details. Talk shows erupted with heated debates about corruption, judicial bias, and the unseen hands of power. On social media, hashtags demanding justice trended within minutes, uniting fans, activists, and ordinary citizens across continents. Outside the courthouse, the streets swelled with people. Some carried candles. Others clutched placards emblazoned with Menglong's face. His smile a haunting reminder of the life stolen too soon. Chants filled the air, demanding not only harsher punishment but also a transparent investigation into how such a verdict could be handed down. The crowd was diverse, young and old, rich and poor, fans and strangers alike, but they were united in rage. As night fell, vigils transformed into protests. Cities across the nation lit up with demonstrations. In Shanghai, thousands marched along a bund, voices echoing across the water. In Beijing, crowds gathered outside government buildings for reform. Even overseas, Seoul to Los Angeles, London to Bangkok, solidarity rallies formed as fans and activists carried banners reading "Justice for you" and "Justice cannot be bought." International response was swift. Celebrities took to their platforms, posting tributes and condemning the verdict. Human rights organizations issued statements calling for transparency and fairness. Politicians in other countries weighed in, framing the case as emblematic of broader issues of corruption and inequality. The world, it seemed, no longer watching passively, it was demanding answers. But behind the public anger lay darker questions. Had the sentence been so light? What forces had influenced the outcome? Was this simply a failure of the system? Or was it deliberate protection of the killers by powerful figures with vested interests? Whispers of backroom deals, bribery, and suppressed evidence began circulating. Fuel to the fire. Journalists dug deeper, covering connections between the defendants and influential individuals. Every revelation pointed to the possibility that the trial had been manipulated from the start. Menglong's family refused to remain silent, announced their intention to appeal the verdict, vowing to fight until justice was truly served. Supported by a growing network of activists, lawyers, and celebrities, they became the faces of a movement that extended beyond one case. Their grief was raw, their determination unyielding, and their message clear: this fight was not just for Menglong, but for every victim silenced by injustice. Protests grew louder, more organized. Online petitions garnered millions of signatures. Crowdfunding campaigns raised money to support legal appeals and protest efforts. Music concerts were dedicated to Menglong's memory, turning art into activism. His songs were played at rallies, image projected onto buildings, his name chanted like a battle cry. He had become more than a star, he had become a symbol of resistance. Meanwhile, the killers remained largely out of the public eye. Their families and lawyers issued statements pleading for understanding, painting them as victims of circumstance. But the public was unmoved. To many, his words only deepened the sense of betrayal, reinforcing the belief that privilege and power had shielded the guilty from true accountability. In the midst of chaos, journalists began warning that the case was spiraling into a crisis larger than the courtroom. Trust in the justice system was eroding. To destabilize social order. For a government already facing scrutiny on multiple fronts, the protests represented not just grief and anger but also a dangerous test of authority. And yet, the people refused to back down. They demanded transparency, reform, and above all, respect for the life that had been lost. The movement gained international traction, with media outlets around the world broadcasting images of the protests, views with grieving fans, and analysis from legal experts. Menglong's name was no longer just a headline, it was a global call to action. The outrage was not simply about a single verdict. It was about the meaning of justice itself. Could a system that allowed such leniency in the face of brutality truly claim to serve its people? Could laws bent by power and influence ever be trusted to protect the innocent? For many, the answer was no, and that answer fueled the fire in their hearts. The first chapter of the fight for justice ended with anger. The story was far from over. The verdict may have been delivered, but the people were not done speaking. And as the protests grew, as the truth unraveled piece by piece, the world realized this case was no longer about just one man or one trial. It was about whether justice itself could survive the shadows of corruption. If this was justice, then what does injustice look like? If this was closure, then why does the wound only deepen? The world waits for answers. But in the meantime, the protests rage on, louder than ever, carrying a single message that echoes across nations: justice for Menglong. It was about the very question of whether the system could be trusted to deliver fairness at all. The killers themselves became ghosts in the narrative. Rarely seen, rarely heard. They existed only through statements crafted by lawyers. Public sentiment painted them as symbols of privilege, led by money and influence. Their silence spoke volumes, and their absence from public accountability became an accusation in itself. People wondered aloud, if justice cannot hold the guilty accountable, then who among us is truly safe? The entertainment industry, too, itself under a harsh spotlight. Insiders confessed to toxic practices, exploitative contracts, and systemic abuses. Menglong's case became a window into a world where stars were chewed up and spat out by the machinery of fame. Whispers of blacklists, coercion, and cover-up spread like wildfire, with fans demanding not only justice for but reform for the entire industry. His death became the catalyst for a reckoning that could no longer be delayed. Amidst the storm, one truth became clear: Menglong's legacy had transformed. He was no longer just an actor, a celebrity. He had become a symbol, a rallying cry, a figure whose memory fueled a movement larger than himself. His name was etched into banners, his face painted on murals, his voice replayed at rallies where thousands wept and chanted. He had become immortal, not through the roles he played or the songs he sang, but through the fight his death inspired. The battle for justice carried on in courtrooms and in the streets. in newsrooms and on social media feeds. Hearing, every protest, every article was another chapter in a story that refused to be silenced. And while the final outcome remained uncertain, fact was undeniable: the world was watching. Not look away. As months passed, the protests showed no signs of fading. They evolved, becoming more organized, more strategic. Activists proposed reforms, demanded accountability, built coalitions that transcended borders. Menglong's case was no longer an isolated tragedy, it was the foundation of a global movement for justice. And so, the question remained: would this movement achieve its goal? Would the appeals lead to harsher sentences, to transparency, to reform? Or would the forces of power and corruption prevail, burying the truth beneath layers of influence? No one could say for certain. But as long as people carried Menglong's memory in their hearts, as long as his name was chanted in the streets, it would continue. The final image is not of a courtroom, but of a candle held high in the darkness, surrounded by thousands more, a sea of light refusing to fade. Menglong's killers may have received their sentence. True verdict is still being written, not by judges, but by the people, by the millions who refuse to let his story end in silence. Justice may have faltered, but hope has not. Protests rage on. The voices grow louder. And the world remains united in one demand: justice for Menglong. Menglong's tragic death and the controversial verdict that followed have ignited not only grief, but also a global movement. His story has become larger than life, a rallying cry against corruption, a symbol of the demand for true justice. A reminder that silence can never erase truth. The final chapter of this case remains unwritten. Thing is certain: Menglong's name will live on in the hearts of millions who continue to fight in his memory. Thank you for joining us on this journey through pain, protest, pursuit of truth. At Red Carpet Revealed, we remain committed to uncovering the stories that matter, the ones that challenge power and reveal the hidden struggles behind the spotlight. Stay with us, share your voice, keep demanding answers, because together, we can make sure that Menglong's story is never forgotten.